Welcome, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you on this lovely Thanksgiving holiday. We're going to have a more laid back and relaxed conversation tonight. I'm sure it'll get intense like it usually does, but we're going to have a good time. That will be our goal. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, and away we go.
Of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you. Got a number of things to talk about in tonight's opening remarks. The way this works is, if you're not aware, I give my opening remarks. While the opening remarks are happening, I am writing down your super chat questions. And then after the opening remarks are done, I do a roll call. And in that roll call, I call you out as I see you, names and locations, and we find out who it is on the other side of the camera. And then the rest of the evening is me answering your super chats. So if there's something you want me to talk about in the second half of the show, by all means, ask me about it. And some of the best moments in this program come from those super chats, come from when people ask me about things, and I, off the top of my head, do my best to answer their questions. So if you want to be entertained in the second half of the show, by all means, send me a super chat. It's really great to be here with all of you tonight. Much love. And I hope you're snug and warm. I hope that you were able to have a good, nice feast of food. I hope that you were able to have a peaceful holiday with your family, with your relatives, with your friends, with your comrades, with people who you care about and people who care about you. I hope that you've been able to have meaningful connections with people. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notifications bell. And be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell, because there's a lot of people who've been telling me that they've been unsubscribed unintentionally. The algorithms sometimes do that. YouTube has admitted that. Or there are people who say they are subscribed, but they don't receive the notifications. So I would encourage you to hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. So I guess I'm not sure exactly what to start out with. I have some good news. I also had a piece of music I wanted to play for all of you, but I think we'll start with the good news first, right? Always good to lead with good news. So just about 10 or 20 minutes before this stream started, I received a screenshot from our good friend Garland Nixon. Now, for those of you who maybe didn't watch last night or don't know who he is, Garland Nixon is a friend of mine. Garland Nixon is the host of a radio program on Sputnik Radio called The Critical Hour, along with Dr. Wilmer Leon, on which I am a frequent guest to give analysis. Garland Nixon is also the host of a radio program on KPFK Los Angeles, and he talks about anti-imperialism. Garland Nixon has been to Venezuela many times. He's been to Nicaragua. He is an anti-imperialist. He comes out of a law enforcement background, but he's become an anti-imperialist. He worked with Fox for a while, and now he is a primary anti-imperialist voice on the internet. He's got a YouTube channel. He's all over social media. And recently, he made a joke at the expense of the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. Just a joke. And his Twitter account was permanently suspended. Now, I've commented that's ridiculous language. They should just say banned, because suspension is temporary by definition, but he's permanently suspended. They banned him from Twitter for this joke that he made at the expense of the U.S. Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. But because of the fact that Garland Nixon is well connected, and because of the fact that he is an anti-imperialist, Russian media did extensive coverage of this. In addition to that, there was extensive coverage of it by Venezuelan media. Telesur did stories on it. And the whole anti-imperialist media community stood up for Garland. I was tweeting out in support of Garland. George Galloway was tweeting out in support of Garland. Tara Reid was tweeting out in support of Garland. Revolutionary Blackout Network was tweeting out in support of Garland. In addition to that, we heard from, there was outrage raised by Jimmy Dore in support of Garland, and there was a whole international firestorm created about this. And the target was, of course, Elon Musk, the billionaire who just purchased Twitter and promised it would get better. And he restored the account of Donald Trump. And in response to this firestorm, Elon Musk came out and said he was thinking about a possible amnesty for everyone who has been suspended or banned from Twitter and didn't break the law. And so just 20 minutes before this stream started, I received this beautiful, beautiful screenshot from Garland. Elon Musk said, should Twitter offer a general amnesty to suspended accounts provided that they have not broken the law or engaged in egregious spam? And you can see the results there. 72% said yes. And then Elon Musk followed up with, the people have spoken. Amnesty begins next week. Vox populi, vox dei. So it appears that an effort by anti-imperialist media, by all of our various voices, has been successful. It appears that we are in the works of seeing, you're in the process next week, we will be seeing not just Garland Nixon, but many anti-imperialist voices, many revolutionary voices that have been banned from social media getting restored. And that the role that our community played in it was part of it. We were part of a winning effort. We weren't the biggest factor, obviously, but we were a factor. And Garland Nixon, who spoke at the Center for Political Innovation Conference alongside Tara Reid and representatives of the All-African People's Socialist Party and the Uhuru movement, and the fact that they went after him in such a ridiculous, targeted way, and the fact that Russian media, that Chinese media, that Venezuelan media, and all anti-imperialist media combined with Jimmy Dore, the fact that all of them came together and raised this case, it seems like this played a role. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. And it appears that not just Garland Nixon, but all kinds of people will be back on social media. This is a great victory. It's kind of forced the imperialists and the Silicon Valley fascists into a situation where it's very hard to deny that they are using their control over the means of information to carry out a political agenda. And because of that, we created a situation. We helped to create a situation by raising the case of our brother Garland Nixon and what was done to him, where they couldn't deny it. And that pushed things far enough that it appears we now have the hope. I mean, let's see if it happens. The hope that anti-imperialist voices will be back on social media. This is a huge victory for our community. Okay. This is a huge victory for our community. It's a huge victory for our community, and we should be very happy about it. So I just wanted to start out the stream with that update on the ongoing story that we've been covering here, and what a victory that really is. That said, I do consider Twitter to be toxic. I no longer have Twitter on my phone. I only use Twitter on my computer. And honestly, Twitter is not good for the mental health of the country. I don't encourage people to use Twitter. And I think that, it's a bit hypocritical. I'm on Twitter and this is streaming on YouTube. Social media isn't good for us. Social media is very, very toxic, but we want to be on here because we want to reach people. This is where people are at, but we also don't want to bring that toxicity into our lives. So it's complicated. And this is a tightrope that all of us have to walk. How do we push the toxicity out of our lives, but how do we reach people that are in this toxic world and bring them to the light and bring them out of the darkness? This is a path we have to very carefully navigate, and our community is figuring out how we will carefully navigate that path. But I think it is a great victory that Garland Nixon has been restored. So the next thing I wanted to do was one of the things that I have talked about on these streams a lot is the importance of classical music. All right, we are surrounded with music that is very emotional, music that is very depressing, music that is very explosive and libidinal and sexual. And so I, for the past 2 or 3 years, have been starting and ending every day by listening to classical music. Every morning I wake up, I pour that unnamed diet beverage and I sip my unnamed diet beverage with Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, or Handel playing to try and set the mood for the day, to make the day peaceful. And then every night when I go to sleep, I turn on Bach, Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn, or Handel as I drift off to sleep in order to try and detoxify from all of the extreme emotions that are pumped up in this world. That classical music appeals to you on a more intellectual level. It's not simply pumping you with emotion, and that we are in a world where emotions are commercialized, advertising. They really want to tickle you in an emotional way. They want to make you angry. They want to make you sad. They want to make you sexually aroused. They want to make you buy things that we're just pumped with emotion all the time. And it can be very, very hard to keep your intellectual mind intact and to not just get wrapped up in all of their emotion. And so classical music that is not about emotion, that is rather about patterns, that is about, kind of teaching you something. Classical music that strikes your mind in a different plane is somewhat healthier. And I'm not opposed to regular music. If people want to listen to regular music, I'm not opposed to it. And I do listen to normal music throughout the day. But at the same time, I realize what I'm dealing with and I'm careful with it. So one of my favorite pieces of music I thought would be very, very appropriate for Thanksgiving because of the fact that Thanksgiving it's really the Americanized version of an ancient tradition called the Harvest Festival. If you went back to ancient Egypt, if you went back to ancient Rome and Greece, they would gather the harvest. And after they gathered the harvest, as winter was coming in, they would have a big feast to celebrate all the hard work they did to grow their crops. This is an ancient tradition. And Jews, they have the Sukkot or the Sukkos, right? And they have their harvest festival. And it seems like, based on, people talk about the myth of the first Thanksgiving and all of that. For whatever reason, in the United States, we've adopted this tradition of the Harvest Festival. And I think about that because Beethoven, one of the greatest composers, probably the greatest composer in history, a man who was deeply political. People forget that Beethoven was a revolutionary. That Beethoven was fighting against the feudal system. He was very, very opposed to feudalism, and he was very excited about the fight for the rights of man. Beethoven was a revolutionary, and he loved people, and he saw in the common people and their struggles for justice the hope for humanity. There's many examples of this. Beethoven was very political throughout his career. And Beethoven, he struggled with mental illness. He was probably, heavily autistic and on the spectrum. He probably also had some deep emotional problems. He was somebody who really struggled, but he was full of passion and emotion. and his passion and emotion enabled him to become a great composer. And his music set the tone for the social explosion that brought down feudalism. And he was very excited about it. And there's a couple stories you hear about Beethoven that kind of define this. For example, one story is that apparently, the Third Symphony that Beethoven wrote was called Eroica, or the heroic, or the hero. And he wrote that symphony, and it was originally dedicated to Napoleon Bonaparte, the French military leader, who called himself the Revolution in Boots and was spreading the ideals of the French Revolution across Europe. However, Beethoven found out that Napoleon had proclaimed himself to be the emperor. And because of that, Beethoven was outraged because he didn't believe that we should have emperors. He didn't believe in monarchies. He wanted a republic, the rule of the people. So the story goes that he went to the place where they had his music. They were going to perform his music Eroica, and he scratched out the dedication to Napoleon. He scratched it out from the sheets of music, the original sheets of music. Another story is that apparently there was some prince, who was angry with Beethoven. I forget the context exactly, but this prince was angry at Beethoven, was telling Beethoven what to do. They were having a big fight about his music, and he sent him a letter, and he said, "There have been and there will be many princes, but there is only one Beethoven." And that was his epic dig, right? There have been many princes, but there will be only one Beethoven. Meaning that Beethoven's achievements came from his own genius, his own musical genius, his own ability to transmit the emotions and the passions of the era and to put them into a piece of music that enlightened the audience and made them more powerful. And that Beethoven was very, very critical of the feudal system. And he was somebody who really, really struggled to be recognized and struggled for his achievements. He was a brilliant musician, but he wasn't born of the aristocracy. He was somebody who had been recognized from the time he was a small child as a very musically gifted person. But he was also somebody who really struggled. Very, very, very beautiful stuff. So I wanted to play the sixth, a piece, not the whole thing, obviously, because we'd be here all night, but I wanted to play my favorite piece from Beethoven, which is called the Shepherd's Hymn. And this is from the Sixth Symphony of Beethoven, the Pastoral Symphony. And this Sixth Symphony, the Pastoral Symphony, is dedicated to the peasantry. It's dedicated to the German peasantry who were rising up and fighting for their rights. The peasant wars in Germany of Thomas Munzer that had created kind of a Christian socialist commune that had existed. The peasantry that were rising up against the landowners and, in alliance with the new emerging intellectuals that were talking about the rights of man and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so there's a joyous moment in the Sixth Symphony that Beethoven composed, dedicated to the peasantry. There's a joyous moment, and it's called the Shepherd's Hymn. And apparently it's based on a song that peasants, shepherds, sang that was popular at the time. And Beethoven, he found a song that was popular among the public, and he used his musical ability. He tapped into it. It was almost like modern folk music in a way, right? We know folk music, right? Folk music is popular songs that people sing as they do work, songs of the people, right? And that you listen to some of the greatest works of composition, they tap into feelings that are among the people, songs that are among the people, stories that are among the people, and they take them and they create a beautiful work of art. From the masses to the masses. That's the mass line of Mao Zedong. From the masses to the masses. And Beethoven was practicing Mao Zedong's mass line. From the masses to the masses. And he composed the Shepherd's Hymn, which is a beautiful piece of music. And it's very appropriate for Thanksgiving. So I thought we would just take a listen, a short listen to the Shepherd's Hymn. And then I would continue with my opening remarks for tonight. That was wonderful. I thought that was very appropriate for Thanksgiving. So, welcome everybody. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. I've certainly got more to say for my opening remarks. If you have questions you'd like me to answer in the second half of the program, by all means, send in a super chat. I will be writing those down. Just a few quick business announcements before I get to the rest of the opening remarks. On December 1st, we will have our next patrons-only stream. That will be on December 1st. So if you want to be part of it, by all means, sign up. We would love to have you join us for a patrons-only stream. And the Center for Political Innovation is continuing to function. We are having our regular meetings once a week. We are planning some live events coming up this spring. So if you haven't joined or rejoined, by all means, you can sign up and join the Center for Political Innovation. We would love to have you as a member. So welcome, everybody. And I guess I just want to get to my opening remarks, the thrust of my opening remarks. I opened by talking about Garland, Nixon, and the great victory that was just won on Twitter. From there, I talked about the history of the harvest festivals and Thanksgiving, and we played a great piece of music. And now I will get to the opening remarks. What am I thankful for? Well, I could give a standard answer. There are things in my life that I am deeply thankful for. I'm thankful that I'm alive and that I have good health. I'm thankful that I'm married and married to the person that I love. I'm thankful that I'm part of a community of people who have been very supportive over the past year, and we've accomplished so much. I'm thankful that I have a job and decent economic security in my life in a world where there's so many people suffering. I'm thankful for quite a few things. But rather than focus on what I personally am thankful for, I'm going to comment on what our community can be thankful for. We are thankful for Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. We are thankful that they taught us that history is constantly in motion, that A does not equal A, and that history is constantly marching forward, and that the universe is ever changing, and that no two things are alike, and that no society or political system is eternal. The kings of Europe, the Pope in the Vatican, they all said that their rule and that the political and social and economic order that they represented was permanent. But Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels taught us that it was not permanent, that the only thing constant is change, and that history is marching forward. And they taught us that just as hunter-gatherer civilization gave way to slavery in the ancient empires of Mesopotamia, Greece, Rome, Egypt, etc., and just as the ancient slave empires were replaced by feudalism, that feudalism gave birth to capitalism, and that this capitalism that we live under will also be replaced. And just like the old systems, it produced its own gravediggers. A class of people, the working class, those of us with nothing to lose but our chains, nothing to sell but our labor, and a whole world to win. The greatest class in history, the working class. The working class, produced by capitalism, are the gravediggers of capitalism. And that ultimately, capitalism, the system of production organized for profit, will be replaced with socialism, a system where the banks and the factories and the major industries and the centers of economic power are organized rationally to serve the people, to serve the people and not the profits of a wealthy few. And we are thankful for Marx and Engels for bringing forward that understanding. We are thankful that they, through teaching this ideology that they developed, laid the basis for the labor unions to go out and struggle and win rights for the workers on the job. We're thankful that by laying the basis with their ideology, the Marxists were able to lead the struggle for the right of women to vote. We are thankful that workers organized political parties and entered the political process in their own accord, in their own interest, and created things like 12 and even 8-hour workdays and minimum wages and protections for the workers on the job. We're very thankful for that. We're thankful for all the struggles for justice that were led by Marxists and for the ideology that enabled those struggles to blossom. People will naturally fight against unjust conditions. There will be spontaneous resistance among the people. However, it was the scientific ideology of Marx and Engels that enabled that resistance to take on a much more effective character by understanding the objective laws of history. But we know that the Marxist movement of Engels and Marx, what they created, that culminated in the Second International, the German Social Democratic Party, the British Labour Party, the French Parliamentary Socialists, that this movement was hijacked. It was turned into its opposite. The very forces they sought to overthrow began utilizing it as a mechanism for stabilizing the imperialist homelands as they spread their tentacles across the planet and established a global financial system called imperialism. And that this degeneration and this watering down, this revisionism of what Marx and Engels stood for ultimately culminated in the First World War, when these parties that had been born as revolutionary parties that fought for the working class all proved that they had deteriorated into mere mechanisms within the imperialist bureaucratic states and sent workers off to die in World War I. But we are thankful for Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks because they saw this coming, and they saw that the Second International did not have revolutionary potential. They saw that imperialism was stabilizing the Western capitalist countries and that the revolutionary energy would come from the colonized countries of the world. It would come from South America. It would come from Africa. It would come from Asia. And that the 20th century would not be defined by the working class of the Western countries rising up and seizing their factories, but rather the 20th century would be defined by the colonized nations that were being kept in a state of underdevelopment by the dominance of Western corporations, struggling to break their chains and establish national liberation. And that when the Bolsheviks broke Russia out of the imperialist system, and when Stalin launched the 5-year economic plans, the world saw a whole country rise up from nothing and rapidly industrialize and electrify and build modern housing and wipe out illiteracy. And the whole world saw solid proof that capitalism and the rule of profits is not necessary, that a society can be organized in a different way. Millions of people were lifted from poverty. Millions of people got running water and electricity, got education, and saw their country modernized because of socialist methods, What Western capitalism and imperialism would not have done was done with state central planning and the 5-year economic plans. And we are thankful that Stalin was able to do this and that millions of people were able to see their country lifted up. And furthermore, we are thankful for Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong lifted China from the chains of colonialism, from the chains of impoverishment and division and balkanization. He lifted China. His great revolution that involved organizing the peasantry and the youth and the women and the most downtrodden people in China's society. His revolution that employed methods of from the masses to the masses, the mass line, criticism, self-criticism. His movement ultimately has enabled China to become the second largest economy in the world and to raise millions and millions of people up from poverty. We are thankful for Mao Zedong and his movement. But furthermore, we look at the problems of 20th century socialism. We look at the fall of the Soviet Union and the great defeat that happened in the early 90s. We look at the fall of the socialist countries of the Eastern Bloc. We look at the political confusion of the counterculture and the synthetic left and the manipulation of our movement by CIA programs like the Congress for Cultural Freedom and MK Ultra. We look at how the dialectical side of Marxism, this belief that change, and thank you so much, that change always comes through struggle, that confrontation and destruction and tearing things down is always the best way of doing things, is always what must be done. This belief that deconstruction is the way forward. We are thankful to see that the socialist countries of the world in the 21st century have broken with this harmful dialectical way of viewing things. That instead they understand that the strength of the Soviet Union and the strength of Deng Xiaoping in China, the strength of Fidel Castro was their ability to create oneness, their ability to get people to feel as if they were part of a community, not to struggle, not to tear things down, but to build, to join arm in arm with their brothers and sisters. We're forced to think of the writings of Anna Louise Strong, the work of Edgar Snow, the work of Agnes Smedley, and how they describe the feeling in those Chinese communes, the feeling on those collective farms in the 1930s, the feeling in those factories and the Stakhanovich movement of the Soviet Union, the feeling that you got when you visited Cuba in the early 60s as they were rapidly building the country up, was something different. It was something very, very different from that desire to rip things down, that desire to exacerbate the contradiction, that desire to tear down the old and march into the future that one got from the writings of Marx and Engels and the European intellectuals. We are thankful that that city-building tendency prevailed, and that the destructive impulses that had defined socialist thought, the ugly events like the Cultural Revolution, like the Yezhovshchina of the late 30s, like the mass executions following the Cuban Revolution, we are thankful that socialism was able to break with some of this thinking. We are also thankful that socialism has lost its hostility to religion. We are thankful that in the final years of his life, Fidel Castro described himself as a Christian. He met with the Pope. He met with prominent Russian Orthodox priests. He quoted the Bible. And he said that in his practice, he was indeed a follower of Jesus Christ. We're thankful for the Sandinistas who lead Nicaragua. And while Guatemala and Honduras are deeply impoverished countries filled with chaos as they writhe under the boot of Western colonialism and imperialism, Nicaragua has raised millions of people from poverty. It has created worker cooperatives and micro-entrepreneurship programs, and it has launched a state-run central plan to improve the lives of the people. It has electrified this entire Central American nation. It has provided housing to millions of people. And compared to the countries that are still under the dominance of Western capitalism, the Nicaraguan government, the Sandinistas have had astounding achievements. And they do so in the name of Christianity, socialism, and solidarity, not in the name of atheism, not in the name of tearing things down and unleashing hate, but rather in the name of love and oneness and solidarity and pride in their culture. They've lifted up the indigenous people and granted them territorial autonomy. They have built up the regions of the country that have been historically impoverished. They have worked very, very hard to build up the rural areas and not have the country be polarized between the town and the countryside. They have done amazing things. And Venezuela, what they have achieved with their 32 universities. When Chavez, the leader of the socialist revolution, was first elected, they had only 12. But under the leadership of Maduro, they now have 32 public universities. They've wiped out illiteracy. They've provided huge amounts of housing and created universal housing for their population. We're thankful for that. We're thankful for what Evo Morales achieved in Bolivia when he had the highest rate of economic growth in South America. We are thankful for what's been achieved in other parts of the world. The Vietnamese, with their socialist-oriented market economy, have created an economic miracle, according to the World Economic Forum. And they couldn't have done it merely by practicing free market economics. They did it by investing in their population, building infrastructure, mobilizing people, and forcing the economy to serve public good, utilizing market mechanisms, but having a state that cares for the people and serves the people, not the rich and powerful. And we are also thankful for the great Imam Khomeini, the leader of the Islamic Revolution of Iran. Khomeini mobilized the Iranian people, led them in their struggle to defeat the Shah. He led the Iranian people to defeat the Iraqi invaders. He led the Iranian people to have a construction jihad and build their nation up from nothing, to industrialize their country, to bring electricity to the whole region, to bring education across the entire nation of Iran, to build a modern country where profits are not in command, but rather the slogan is not capitalism, but Islam. And the major centers of economic power are controlled by the state. And the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, a committed anti-imperialist organization, is the biggest entity economically in the country. We are thankful that the Islamic Revolution of Iran has done so much to raise people from poverty, so much to stand with the Palestinians in their resistance against Israel. We are thankful for that. And furthermore, we are thankful for the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, the man who had the brilliance of using economic methods to overturn the devastating consequences of the fall of the Soviet Union, to create two gigantic state-controlled megacorporations, Gazprom and Rosneft, to stabilize Russia's economy, to throw criminal oligarchs in jail, to provide services and education to the population. And now we are thankful for the military of Russia that is coming to the aid of the peoples of Donbass, the people who've suffered 8 years of bombardment, had their language outlawed, been facing a food blockade, the people who saw the Minsk Accords that were supposed to recognize their right to their language and their culture and their autonomy, saw those accords ignored, saw the World War II memorials being torn down, saw racial and ethnic hatred being promoted. The people who lived for 8 years praying that somebody would come to support them have now come out in big numbers to cheer and support the Russian army that has come in to protect them and to allow them to vote in referendums, to break away from a government that doesn't want them, a government that hates them because they speak Russian, because they are proud of the Soviet Union and the defeat of the Nazis. We are We are thankful for all the Russian folks who are on the battlefields, sacrificing to protect their homeland, to make sure that NATO, the criminal terrorist coalition that destroyed Libya, that destroyed Afghanistan, that destroyed the former Yugoslavia, to make sure that that criminal alliance never creeps any closer to Russia and never brings nuclear weapons right to Russia's doorstep. We are thankful for all the sacrifices of those people are making on the battlefield, the Russians, for the Belarusians. But in addition to all of that, we are thankful for those right here in our own country who have sacrificed and worked hard for justice. We are thankful for Harriet Tubman and John Brown and Frederick Douglass. We are thankful for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. We are thankful for Gus Hall and Eugene Debs and Joe Hill and the industrial workers of the world. We are thankful for the Communist Party of the 1930s that mobilized the working class to build industrial unions and sit-down strikes and unemployment councils demanding jobs and education. We're thankful for the Black Panthers and their work to provide a free breakfast program and to build a rainbow coalition of working people on the basis of economic justice. We are thankful for the revolutionary youth movement and the organizations coming out of the 1970s that worked hard to spread revolutionary and anti-imperialist politics among the broad masses of Americans, that rejected the counterculture, new left politics promoted by the CIA, but instead attempted to build a popular working class organization. The sacrifices made by so many people in the new communist movement of the 1970s. And furthermore, we are thankful for those who kept the flame of anti-capitalism and anti-imperialism alive in times where such a message was not well received and not popular. We're thankful for those who marched in support of Mumia Abu-Jamal and prevented his execution. We are thankful for those who continued to support Leonard Peltier, the great Native American, who has been framed up and sent to federal prison for a crime that even his prosecutor does not believe he is guilty of. We are thankful for those who have organized in so many progressive ways. And furthermore, we stand in solidarity with all who hold on to what Marxism, socialism, anti-imperialism stand for. All who have refused to surrender in the face of wokeness, the toxic ideology through which the imperialists have attempted to co-opt the beautiful movement of working people, the beautiful movement for socialism and anti-imperialism that is spread across the planet. We are thankful for all who have been firm and bold and brave to resist the cancel culture, to resist the smears and the lies and the harassment that faces anyone who stands for these genuine principles. We are thankful for those who have not surrendered and become Democratic Party operatives, and become academic, privileged postmodernists, but instead held on to class struggle, populism, scientific socialism, and Marxism. But in addition to that, we are thankful for the amazing breakthroughs, for the amazing understanding that we now can have when we read the writings of Xi Jinping and the publications of the Chinese Communist Party, for the brilliance and the understanding we can get from Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il and all of the leaders of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We're thankful for the understanding of Marxism we can get by reading the texts of Bolivarian socialism and the way that they have updated their revolutionary movements to meet the needs of the people of Latin America, to correct the mistakes of socialism in the 20th century. And we are thankful for many different revolutionary traditions and currents all around the world that all have led us to continue the work that we are doing right here, that have led us to understand the necessity and the possibility for creating 21st century socialism in America. For all of those who have allowed us and encouraged us to break with the dogmatism of the past and to embrace 21st century socialism and Marxism, to embrace the revolutionary movements of the global South, of the colonized world, and to reject the toxic, hateful, pro-imperialist drivel that now dominates academia, presenting itself as Marxism, when in reality it is nothing but pro-imperialist ideology designed to incite people against each other, destroy communities, and lay the basis for a new world war. We are thankful. We are thankful. We are deeply, deeply thankful for our heritage and our tradition. I agree with Hugo Chavez that Jesus Christ was the greatest socialist in all history. And I agree that, as Che Guevara said, a true revolutionary is motivated by feelings of great love. And I believe that what we are about, the constructive, optimistic socialism promoted by the Center for Political Innovation, has a very big future in this country. I believe this, and I am thankful that I have the opportunity to be part of this. And as hard as things are in America now, I'm thankful to be alive in this time, because I know we are heading toward the end of this rotten system. We are heading toward the moment where America will join with Russia and China and Iran and Venezuela, where America will reorganize its economy to serve the people and public good, where growth will once again be promoted. I know we are heading toward the end, the final days, the last days of American imperialism. And I know that the work that we do in this time is going to be very challenging, but very important. And that we have a very big, big privilege to be alive in this time and be tasked with the great task that we have to rescue the American people from the nightmare unfolding, to build communities of solidarity in a society where people are incited against each other and taught to be antisocial. It's hard work. It's a big task, but we are not afraid to take up history's challenge. And I want to express nothing but great love to all of you and great appreciation to all of you for what has been happening and what you have done over the course of the last few years, and for what you have yet to do, because we have so much more to accomplish. So much more lies ahead in the coming months and the coming year. We have a lot of big plans around peace on the Korean Peninsula, around events that are planning and that are happening, around books that are going to be published. We are going to lay the intellectual basis for something new, just like our forefathers Marx and Engels. All the activism that came required ideological guidance. Thought and ideas are very important. And the thought and the ideas that we are putting forward on this channel are very, very, very important. And I want to express great love and appreciation to all of you for everything that is happening in our time, because we all have an important role to play. We're all doing the best we can. And we're all facing tough circumstances. This is a very hard time to be alive. It's a very hard time to be a young person. This is an age of so much sadness, so much hopelessness, so much rage and resentment, so much pessimism. But I want to thank you all for coming together with me and using our human energy and our power to connect to something higher, something that can enable us to get beyond it all and build something beautiful. So I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart and tell you how thankful I am for you and for the support that you give to the continued work that we do. And that's how I'll end my opening remarks for tonight. So why don't we, at this point, have a roll call, names and locations, names and locations. And then from there, I'll start answering super chat questions. And that will be our show for tonight. So names and locations, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations, names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? That's right, Johnny. We're having the roll call. All right. Timoshenko is in St. Louis. Jared from Virginia. Rogue Valley, Oregon. We got Cleveland Pirate Alex. We got beautiful, Caracas, Venezuela. Jose Gonzalez. Yada Yisrael. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Edwin from the Philippines. Pahi from Albuquerque. We got Jeff, Grand Canyon. Mountains of Virginia. Ian Chester in England. Hendricks in Austin. Nate from Liverpool, Northern Virginia. Brodeen in Georgia. Jeff from the Grand Canyon. Herb Bryant in Tampa, Florida. Phuket, Thailand. Enoch, Australia. Carl from the West Coast. Savannah, Georgia. Henko from Bangor, Maine. Carl from the West Coast. UK, Wales. Jim from Harrisburg. Yuri from Buffalo, New York. Bob Troy, UK. Mr. Malik from UK, Wales. Florida. Heidi from Edinburgh, Scotland. Auckland, New Zealand. Stephen Clearly is with us. Klaus from East Berlin is with us. Very, very good. Sheltering in place, says Richard. Very good. Jack from New Jersey. I'm in the house, says John Taylor. Auckland, New Zealand is with us. The Beachment Bolshevik in Kentucky. Very, very good. Names and locations. I will continue to call you out as I see you. We have a few super chats, but not too many of them. So if there are folks who have more questions, please shoot them my way. Phoenix from Arizona. Micah from Las Vegas. Welcome. Beachment Bolshevik in Kentucky. The planet Saturn. I have a feeling you're not there, but that's okay. If you want to feel like you're on the planet Saturn, you're still welcome. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Names and locations. Deb in Mexico. Deborah Wilson, good friend of our show. Kieran from San Diego is with us. Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati. DDR, Dance Dance Revolution, East Berlin. Right? There we go. I moved to a different room, says Johnny. There you go. There you go. New location. London. Very, very good. We got a guy from London. Very, very good. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Always a pleasure to speak with you. Names and locations. We got George in Chicago. Very, very good. We got Saturn is always a favorite. We got Akang Malik in Houston. Very good. Good to have you. Clove Coast, Seattle. We got Michael. Very, very good. All right. All right, folks. So I guess, as I said, the second half of the show is all you. The second half of the show is all you. So please send a super chat question. Your thoughts on Q gay nightclub shooter. Very good. So there we go. Yeah, keep the super chats rolling in because that's the second half of the show is just me answering your questions. So, by all means do that. Can you explain the Minsk agreement? Yes, I can. Very good. Very, very good. All right. And a few business announcements, just in case folks missed it when I said it before. First, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. YouTube does have this habit of unsubscribing people. The algorithms do that. So you want to make sure you stay subscribed and you want to make sure you're getting the notifications. If you want to support this channel and the work that we do, you can always sign up on the Patreon. That's one way to support the work that we do. We have a patrons only stream coming up December 1st. If you want to be included in that, by all means, sign up. And on top of that, the Center for Political Innovation, we continue to have our weekly meetings. We are planning to have a live event this spring, multiple live events this spring. We also have some exciting projects we soon should be working on. So if you want to become a member of the CPI, you can sign up on the website. That's one way to do it. If folks have more super chat questions, that's what I'm here to do in the second half of the show, is answer your questions. So yeah, I'll be writing them down. It looks like I've got 5 of them that I've received so far. So please continue the super chats and I will continue answering them. So we'll get, all right. Very good. Very, very good. All right. So the first question I received was from Tom, and he asked, socialism is a higher mode than capitalism. Did the USSR ever achieve it? Trotsky did not think so. Well, that is an interesting question, because that really gets to the essence of what is socialism. What is socialism? What is socialism? I mean, that is an important question. And in Trotsky's book, The Revolution Betrayed, he argued the Soviet Union was not socialist. And the reason the Soviet Union was not socialist was because socialism, he argued, was a higher mode of production or a higher stage than capitalism. That, hunter-gatherer civilization had been replaced by a higher mode. That feudalism had been replaced by a higher mode of capitalism. So the argument was that the Bolsheviks and the working class had taken power in Russia. They had created a state-run economy, but because they had done it on the basis of an impoverished economy, they were building the country up from nothing on the basis of feudalism, that they were not a fully socialist society. And Trotsky was specifically reacting to the 1936 Constitution of the Soviet Union that declared that the Soviet Union had fully completed the construction of socialism. They were now a fully socialist society. And Trotsky was saying, no, they weren't. Well, this kind of goes to show that when you're arguing about the definition of words, it gets a little tricky now, doesn't it? Michael Parenti, in one of his talks, he says that, people get nitpicky and want to say we don't call them socialist, right? We want to call them lampshades or desk chairs or whatever. There clearly was and is an alternative economic system in the world today. And that economic system is defined by production, organized not for profit, but based on a central plan. The Soviet Union was the first such society. That eventually led to China and Eastern Europe adopting these modes of production. That eventually led to the Cuban Revolution, Vietnam, DPRK. And then there were even more forms of socialism that emerged. You had Libya under the leadership of Gaddafi. You had Baathism in Iraq and Syria. You have now the Islamic Revolution that is anti-capitalist but rejects Marxism. You have Bolivarian socialism in Latin America. There is clearly an alternative economic system that exists. Clearly. Now, is this socialism or not? Well, I would argue that Trotsky is half right. I think it is not capitalism. However, it is also not the full incarnation of socialism. Trotsky is right in saying that as socialism becomes the dominant system, for us to see what socialism is really meant to be, it does have to be the dominant system in the world. It does have to be producing at a higher level of abundance and a higher technological level than capitalism. So the Soviet Union being surrounded in the 1930s and under attack and rapidly industrializing and having real economic miracles was still not at the technological level of Western capitalism. Now, Trotsky was saying it's not socialist because in Trotsky's mind, socialism had to come to the West. His theory of permanent revolution said that the West is all that matters. And because these countries are building socialism on the basis of an agrarian economy, they're rapidly industrializing, they're building up from nothing. It's not really socialism because socialism is the sequel to Western capitalism. It's the thing that comes after Western capitalism. That's classical Marxism. That's what Marx believed. But Lenin developed his concept of imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, where he showed that there would not be revolutionary energy in the West, that it would be in the colonized world. And Trotsky admitted in his writing on the permanent revolution that yes, communists and Marxists could take power in quote unquote backward countries, in countries that were not fully industrialized. But Trotsky argued that it was pointless because they couldn't be fully socialist because they were impoverished, and that socialism is the next stage in the West. Well, as we can now see, China, many people argue, has a stronger economy than the United States. It's generally referred to, China's economy is generally referred to as the second largest economy in the world. But there are a number of economists and economic measurers who say that it is actually the biggest economy in the world. It's not plagued by the instability and confusion facing Western countries, that's for sure. It's more stable, and its growth is far more long-term than Western capitalist countries' growth has been. My whole life, I've been hearing China's about to collapse. China's going to collapse. Oh my God, China is their economy. It's been growing for so long. It's going to have to collapse. And it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because the state controls the means of production. And China has had far more long-term growth. China at this point is, starting to have more millionaires and billionaires than the Western capitalist countries have. And some people argue that China is the strongest economy in the world, and is the largest economy in the world. Now, it has more people than the United States, and there's other factors there. And the average Chinese person's, living standard is not anywhere near the living standard of the average American. So it's hard to completely make that argument. But, when socialism does become the dominant mode of production in the world, it will be very different than capitalism. And then this brings us to the very important point that Nelson Peary makes in this book, The Future is Up to Us. And this is an important point, which is that when the capitalists overturned feudalism, they weren't just overturning a social system, they were overturning a mode of production, a technological plane. They were replacing an agrarian economy with an industrial economy. And that when slavery overturned the hunter-gatherer civilizations, they were replacing hunting and gathering with a mode of production called agriculture, where you grew your own food, etc. And that the irony of socialism is that socialism was still the same technological methods for organizing an economy. It was the same kind of factories, the same kind of farms, it was the same technology, the same mode of production, except it was organized in a different way. It was organized not for profit. And that in some ways, you could argue that socialism in the Soviet Union was comparable to the peasant wars in Germany. In Germany, there were many times peasants rose up, seized control of, the feudal commons, overthrew the landlord, and started organizing an agrarian economy among more egalitarian lines. However, they would eventually be defeated because it's more efficient to run an agrarian economy on the basis of, feudalism. And that, collective ownership of land, some egalitarian way of organizing feudalism might be better, but it's not going to be as efficient. And that the reason feudalism had emerged to begin with is because it was a mode of production that matched the underlying economic base. And it wasn't until a higher technological plane had been achieved that laid the basis for the industrial society that feudalism could be overturned. And that brings us to the computer revolution. Because really, It is the computer revolution that is destroying capitalism. It's not China. It's not Russia. It's not Cuba or Venezuela. Capitalism is right now being destroyed by the computer revolution. It's that built-in problem of poverty amid plenty, of overproduction. Self-driving cars should be a good thing. In a rational socialist society, self-driving cars are a great thing because it leads to less work for everyone to do. In capitalism, self-driving cars mean mass unemployment and riots in the streets. I could tell you the coal miner's riddle. The little boy, he says to his father, why is it so cold? The father says, because we can't afford any coal to heat the stove. The little boy says to the father, why can't we afford any coal to heat the stove? The father says, because I lost my job at the coal mine. The little boy says, and why did you lose your job at the coal mine? The father says, because there is too much coal. And this problem of capitalism cannot be overcome. And the computer revolution is necessitating the overthrow of capitalism, because under capitalism, the worker is reduced to the appendage of a machine. Under feudalism, most people are peasants. You got soldiers, you got, your landowners and your nobility. And then you have another group of people in feudalism you call craftsmen, blacksmiths, basket weavers, wood carvers. And Marx, in his economic manuscripts, he writes a lot on alienated labor, and in a lot of his writing, he writes a lot about the decline of the craftsman, right? And how, the craftsman, he spends, the wood carver spends his whole life carving wood in this specific way. And he gets paid for it. It's his job, right? And his father was a wood carver who taught him how to carve wood. He went through an apprenticeship, and he does it all by himself. And he carves wood in his own special way. And every piece of wood he carves, he puts his own soul into it. And that basket weaver, again, his father taught him how to weave baskets. And he weaves those baskets all by himself. And he weaves baskets, the whole basket, he weaves it himself, and he puts his soul into it. The blacksmith and the craftsman under feudalism, right? He makes the product himself. He gives his whole life to making the product. And he puts a bit of his soul into that product. At the end of the day, he says, I made this. And he gives somebody the basket. He gives the king the basket, and this is my basket. The king says, wow, that guy made it. That it is this kind of spiritual relationship that the craftsman has with his product. He made it. But capitalism, Marx noticed, did away with that. And instead of a craftsman, you have, Karl Marx talks about the appendage of the machine. The factory worker, he's not putting his soul into that product. He's not putting his heart into that product. He's just he's on an assembly line. He's just pushing a button, pushing a button, pushing a button. He doesn't see at the end of the day, an auto worker who makes cars. Do they, at the end of the day, look at the car that comes out of the assembly line and say, wow, I made that. That's my hard labor? No. Because the work that he did, he was just functioning as the appendage to the machine. The machine made the car. He was an appendage who put his labor power, his value. It was his value that made the car have value. The machines don't create value. They're dead capital. But it's human labor that creates value. But rather than having this spiritual relationship, the worker is simply having value extracted from him. And he's alienated from it. And this is a big point that Karl Marx makes on alienated labor. This notion that, the worker in the industrial society is not putting his soul into the product. Well, that's ancient history. That's 200 years ago. In our time, the worker is not an appendage to a machine. The machine has no appendages. With 3D printers, with industrial production, I talk about book binderies, for example. There used to be whole factories full of people who were appendages to machines, and they bound books all day. And it used to be in the 90s. People talked about this. I had friends who published books. If you published a book, you had to buy 5,000 copies of the book. Why? Because it wasn't cost effective. If you went to a book publishing place, if you were going to publish a book, you better buy at least 5,000 copies of it. But now there's print on demand. You just push a button and a book comes out. Print on demand means that, oh, well, you push a button and a book comes out. And think of all the people who used to spend their whole lives. You had workers on the bookbindery floor. You had, layout people and typesetters, and you had people who figured out. I mean, it used to be that one book that was made professionally involved the labor of thousands of people, maybe, right? Who designed it, who proofread it, it was a big process. Well, now, print on demand, somebody on a computer lays it out. They find the images they want. Maybe you hire a proofreader to go over it. You obviously have a writer who wrote it. And then you send it off to Amazon. And then anytime anyone orders one, it pops out of the machine. And that's it. The machine has been stripped of its appendages, right? And that is what is destroying modern capitalism, is that there's no place for the worker at the assembly line. And the workers are left outcast and starving amid the wonders they have made. Capitalism cannot handle the computer revolution. Only socialism can handle the computer revolution, because in socialism, production is not organized for profit, and the worker is no longer simply valued by his ability to sell his labor to a boss. Under capitalism, your only way of surviving is selling your labor power to a capitalist. The capitalist needs your labor power to give value to his products. Human labor puts the value into the product, and he needs your labor power. And the amount of labor power that goes into each product is constantly diminishing. And the role of the worker in production is being reduced. The only way out of this is with socialism. And this points to what Nelson Peary points out in his book, which is that this is a higher technological plane. Just like you had to have, as industrial production emerged, you had to overthrow feudalism, because feudalism couldn't handle industrial production. Well, capitalism cannot handle the computer revolution. It can't handle computers. And because capitalism cannot handle computers, we're going to have socialism. And China can handle computers. China's doing fine with computers. They're doing fine. You can look at the Eurasian Economic Union, the Belt and Road Initiative. China's doing fine. They can handle computers just fine because they have a planned economy. But an economy based on profit, where the value of a human being is reduced to a financial calculation, it can't handle it. Self-driving cars, as Andrew Yang has pointed out, would create riots in the streets. The capitalist West, where people are increasingly having no role at the assembly line, they don't know what to do. They've got millions of people they don't know what to do with. So they try to kill them off, try to drive down the population, try to control them with social media. They've got all these people, and there's no place for these people in the assembly line. Western capitalism doesn't have room for all these people. Doesn't have room for them. So there you go. There you go. Yeah, and so you could argue that socialism as the replacement of capitalism is something we won't really see until the computer revolution, because the technological basis for overturning capitalism, the higher technological basis that would lay the basis for socialism, is just now emerging. So there's something to what Trotsky's saying. He's not completely wrong in what he's saying, but there's clearly another economic system in the world. If you don't want to call it socialism, you can call it something else, but it clearly exists. But it's not the dominant mode of production. But it is with the computer revolution that it will have to become the dominant mode of production. And at that point, it would fulfill socialism. It would be the sequel, the replacement of Western capitalism. So there you go. There we go. All right. The next super chat question I have is, where does the notion that gay equals bourgeois come from? Well, again, I'm not somebody who claims to be an expert on these kinds of issues, and I try not to focus on culture wars. But the idea that homosexuality is bourgeois, only exists among rich people, the main reason that idea has been prevalent is for the fact that working class people didn't have the luxury of being gay. If you were a working class person and you were gay, you would be fired from your job. People would think you were a creepy child molester and an evil person, and you'd be fired from your job. You'd be kicked out of your church. You'd be, a working class person would lose everything if they were gay. But some wealthy person was able to be gay because they weren't worried about how they would pay their bills. They weren't, they weren't as dependent on their community in order to survive. And so working class people had the didn't have the economic privilege that made it easier to be gay. Now, that didn't mean that, that gay people who were wealthy didn't get beaten up. It didn't mean that gay people who were wealthy weren't estranged from their families, etc. Oscar Wilde was a very, very wealthy playwright and writer, and he went to prison for being gay. So, just because gay people, were wealthy didn't mean they weren't persecuted. But I think that has to do with the fact that in times when homosexuality was much more widely stigmatized, it was easier for those of economic means to be homosexual than it was for those of not economic means. I think that's where that notion originally comes from. Also, I think, and then there's the other thing, which is, and this is the interesting thing, is that there are some people, and again, there are some people who are just gay, right? That are just gay. And then we also know that there are people who experiment, right? That people that, for whatever reason, they experiment, right? And I think that people that aren't working a 9-to-5 job, people that aren't struggling to pay their bills and feed their kids, people that have more time on their hands are more able to experiment. Okay. And that the perception that a lot of people have in times when homosexuality was not as widely tolerated, was much more stigmatized. There was a perception that homosexuality was all experimentation. I'll never forget a conversation that I had when I was in high school, right? I lived in a small town and I was in the marching band. There was this girl sitting next to me in the marching band. She said to me, "Caleb, I heard that you think being gay is not a choice." And I said, "Well, yeah, my understanding is that being gay is not a choice." She said, "I don't understand that." So she put her arm around the girl sitting next to her. Just put her arm around her. And she said, "Okay, if I married her, wouldn't that be a choice?" And I said to her, "Do you want to marry her?" And she said, "No, I want to marry a boy." And I said, "Then you're not gay." And she looked at me. And there was this big realization, like her eyes got bigger, like, oh, right. But again, in times where these issues were not widely discussed, this girl was from a very religious family where she wasn't, anything about gay people, any talk about it. She didn't understand that gay people were attracted to people of the same sex. She was convinced that people were homosexual because they were breaking the rules or experimenting. Right. And that is a perception that a lot of people had. I don't think they have it anymore. I think now everyone realizes it. But in times when homosexuality was not discussed, I mean, I know boomers who didn't know what homosexuality was until they were in college because it just wasn't discussed. It was a bad word that, boomers talked about when they were teenagers or whatever. You'd hear about queers or faggots or whatever, but they just thought it was a curse word. They didn't know what it meant. And it wasn't until they were in college taking classes on psychology that they even knew what the term meant, right? What homosexuality was. They just didn't know what it was. That's a very common experience for boomers. So in times when homosexuality was not as widely promoted or widely tolerated, I should say, or widely allowed to exist, when it was much more stigmatized, my understanding is that there was a widespread perception that it was something, they didn't see it as an orientation. They didn't see it as people being born this way. They saw it more as this is people with too much time on their hands. This is people who don't have to work hard, who go around and party, and they've been having wild sex with people of the opposite sex. And so now they want to try something kinkier and weirder, and they want to have sex with people of the same sex. And that is also a perception, right? So this stereotype of gay people as being bourgeois, that's the root of it, from what I understand. I don't know why you're asking me that, but it's an interesting question, but that's my understanding of it. But there you go. All right. Now, Johnny is asking me to check out Beethoven's string quartets. Great. Yeah, I will. I mean, I've listened to some of them before, and yeah, classical music, the way I started listening to classical music was years ago. I had a roommate. And my roommate, let me back up. So when I was a kid, this is my experience with classical music. When I was a kid, I had a radio in my bedroom, and I would put the radio on when I was going to sleep. And my parents were very strict about what music I was allowed to listen to on that radio. So they insisted that I have that radio tuned to NPR. And so on the weeknights, it would be classical music, and I would just go to sleep. I would turn on that classical music, and I would just go to sleep. And then on the weekends, they had folk music, and I enjoyed the folk music. I developed kind of a love for folk music as I was laying there in bed going to sleep. But my parents were very adamant about it. So I always just thought of classical music as boring. I just thought of it as boring. So I had a roommate in college who was a classical music composer. He was studying composition at that point. And I asked, I told him, I think classical music is boring. And he said, Wagner is not boring. I was like, okay. I'd heard Flight of the Valkyries before, but he got me to listen to Wagner, and I started listening to Siegfried's Funeral March, and got Enter the Gods to Valhalla, and I was like, whoa, Wagner is amazing, and I loved Wagner. And so Wagner was my introduction to classical music. And the reason that I could appreciate Wagner was because I'd been listening to rock music, etc. And Wagner music is heavily emotional. It's like rock music in that way. So I realized that was like the classical music that could appeal to me, because I was looking for that emotional Wagner stuff. And that was something I could appeal to. So there you go. That was something I could relate to. But on top of that, it was then later when I was learning about classical music, listening to what people in the LaRouche organization had to say about it. That's when I started to develop a love for non-Wagner classical music, non-emotional, more intellectual classical music. And I started doing the thing that I do now. But there you go. Yeah, I'm glad I'm streaming tonight. I'm in a better place. Sometimes we get in negative places, but tonight I'm just kind of chill. So there you go. Thoughts about the Q nightclub shooter. So I guess the first version of events that we got was that this shooter was motivated by homophobia, right? And that he was motivated by anti-gay bigotry. He went to this nightclub and shot all these people for being gay. Now we're finding out that this shooter identifies as being non-binary. And so people are saying, wait a second, hold up. So this guy who's supposed to have shot up this club because he hates gay people is himself transgender. And now CNN interviewed somebody who said, oh no, that's a man. Now, I am not somebody who's following the details of this case very, very intensely, right? But I'm sorry, what is the response to anybody on social media? Now, here I am getting fired up, and I don't want to get fired up tonight. But if I got on social media and said about any trans person, any trans woman, I said, that's a man, what would they do to me on social media? They would kill me. Oh my God, you're misgendering them. You're being transphobic. Who are you to say it's a... Well, this LGBT activist said, no, that's a man. And because that feeds the liberal narrative, that's okay. And that shows you how selective the cancel culture is. If anyone got on television and said that a non-binary or trans person, oh, that's a man, I can tell by looking at them. If you said that, you would be canceled immediately. They would destroy you. You wouldn't have a job. They would call up your employers. Your family members would get harassed on the street. They would just destroy you. Oh, but it serves their narrative, so it's okay. The cancel culture is just totalitarianism. That's all it is. That is all it is. It is the liberal order going after dissidents. And some of the dissidents might deserve it. Some of the dissidents might be bullies or homophobes or something like that. But for the most part, it's just It is just manipulation of social media to target and bully dissidents. And that's what they've done to me. And that's what they've done to other leftist critics. And you'll notice that people that are, in line with the liberal order, don't get targeted. It's not enforced fairly because it's not about justice. It's about, defending the liberal order. That's what it is. It's about defending the liberal order. And the same with the Me Too stuff. Me Too destroys some people, and some people, they just, it's in the news for 2 seconds and it goes away because they make a decision. Who do we want to destroy? And they sit there and they actively decide who they want to destroy. It's all fake. The worst thing about social media is it gives the perception that it represents real life, and it doesn't. People in real life are much more friendly. People in real life are much less emotional about things. And if you disagree with somebody, go and talk to them about it in person. And you may still disagree and you may still have a heated argument, but it won't be the same. But on the internet, everyone just immediately, it gets very intense very quickly. The internet is not real life. The internet is not real life. The internet brings out the worst in people, and I'm convinced a lot of it is just not real. So that's all I want to say about that. Can you explain the Minsk agreement? Sure. Well, in 2014, the United States backed a movement, an uprising in Ukraine to bring down the Ukrainian government. Lukashenko, the Ukrainian leader, was removed. Not Lukashenko. What is his name? Yanukovych. President Yanukovych was removed. There was a mass movement called Euromaidan, where he was toppled. They overthrew the elected government. And then a fanatically anti-Russian government took power in the government in Kiev. In Kiev, you had a fanatically anti-Russian government. Well, these people in Donbass who speak Russian in their households, who are very proud of the Soviet Union and its heritage, who vote for the Communist Party, they didn't like that. They weren't thrilled about that. So they immediately announced they were going to separate. Creedence Clearwater Revival. They announced they were going to separate from the government in Kiev. They declared independence. They declared the Donetsk People's Republic, the Lugansk People's Republic. That's what they declared. So they wanted Russia to recognize them, and Russia did not recognize them. Russia instead facilitated a negotiation process called the Minsk Accords. And at the Minsk Accords, the government in Kiev agreed to grant autonomy to the people in the eastern regions, to recognize their rights, and to gradually integrate them back into Ukraine. And that's what Russia wanted. If Russia had wanted to, that's the narrative we get, is that Russia just wants to invade Ukraine. If that was the case, then why did they specifically try to negotiate a situation where the people in those regions could be allowed back in? And the Minsk Accords were signed, but they were not fulfilled. And the Ukrainian government did the opposite of what they were expected to do in the Minsk agreement. They worked really, really hard to bomb these people, to attack them, to isolate them. There was the horrendous massacre in Odessa at the House of Trade Unions where people were burned alive in a building and people were trying to flee the building and they beat them to death with baseball bats. It was a horrendous event. And everything was done to make sure that the people in these eastern regions didn't have their rights respected. They weren't allowed to integrate back into Ukrainian society. If anything, it's really Ukraine that's been expansionist, because President Zelensky has said anyone who considers themselves to be Russian or wants to speak Russian shouldn't be in this country. Well, the people in the eastern regions voted to separate from Ukraine. They voted to form the independent people's republics. So why can't they separate? Oh, they can't have the territory. So it's like basically they want the territory. They just don't want the people there. So it's Ukraine that's being expansionist. It's the fanatically anti-Russian forces in eastern Ukraine. They want the whole country. And they don't want to recognize that the Russian-speaking people of the eastern regions, they have a right to their territory as well. They want to force all of them out of Ukraine. They want to make a situation where they're not welcome. Their history is not taught. Their monuments to World War II are torn down. Their language is outlawed. And Russia has said, let these people be part of Ukraine. Let the Minsk agreement happen. Let these people be part of Ukraine. But alas, no. But there you go. So yeah, the Minsk agreement was an agreement made by the government in Kiev with the people of the eastern regions that they did not fulfill. And Russia facilitated it because they did not want to have a war. So there you go. All right. Next question. And if anyone has any more super chat questions, by all means, just keep them rolling in, because that's what we're here to do in the second half of the show, is answer super chat questions. Was the cost of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan a factor in the fall of USSR? Yes. And not just that, the arms race, the fact the Soviet Union was forced, it was really an arms catch-up. The Soviet Union was constantly, the USA would build a bomb, and then the Soviet Union would have to build one just as big, and then they'd build another bomb. And it was, the Soviet Union was constantly having to spend more and more money on its military budget. And that was a drain on its economy. And there's no question about that. No question that was a drain on its economy. And the fact the Soviet Union was compelled to send its military to Afghanistan, that was also a situation where, again, it was a drain on their economy. So there you go. I mean, it was a cost of lives. I mean, people lost their lives in the battlefield of Afghanistan, and yeah, I mean, it hurt the morale of the Soviet Union. I mean, yeah, it was devastating. There's a reason that Zbigniew Brzezinski called it the Afghan trap, right? They provoked a situation where the Soviet Union would feel obligated to send military forces to Afghanistan, and it certainly had an impact on Soviet society. And I think that's why Russia would like to get out of Ukraine as fast as possible. And that's why the United States wants to prolong this conflict. That's why the government in Kiev is doing everything they can to prolong this. Because they know Russia does not want to get involved in a long-term engagement in Ukraine. They would prefer to be out of there, but at this point, the people in the eastern regions have suffered for so long, and Russia's being threatened. Russia has no choice but to intervene. And they don't want to do it. They tried to get out of doing it. So there you go. Next question. Do you have any good book recommendations on the second intervention into Mexico, 1861 to 1867? No, I do not. I did really like the autobiography of Ulysses S. Grant and what he wrote about the Mexican-American War, but that's a different war. That's not what you're asking about. No, I don't have any good resources on that particular conflict. There you go. Now, this is the last super chat question I've got listed here, but if people have more things they want me to talk about, we can keep going, as always. Creedence Clearwater Revival. So that was a rock band from the 1960s, right? The guys had long hair and beards, right? And it's kind of, I mean, it's rock and roll, right? They did Proud Mary, Rolling on the River. They did Bad Moon Rising. I always think about the Bad Moon Rising song because there's a verse in that song that makes me think about the Weather Underground and their bombing campaigns, right? One of the verses in the song is, what is it? Hope you have got your things together. Hope you are quite prepared to die. Looks like we're in for nasty weather. One eye is taken for an eye. And I think about that because from what I've heard, the Weathermen, the Weather Underground, they on their leaflets, they would have quotes from Creedence Clearwater Revival. That was a thing that they would do on their leaflets. They really liked them. They were like their favorite counterculture band or something. And so, that particular verse, and then the Weathermen, and their sudden, use of violence or whatever, it kind of fits. Fortunate Son. Yeah, right. That's a song that is played in like every Vietnam War movie ever, right? Every time they show Vietnam in a war movie, inevitably they start playing Creedence Clearwater Revival's Fortunate Son, it's whether it's kind of ironic, but it's just, that's what they do in movies now. They just play Fortunate Son while they show the Vietnam War. Okay, so what to read by Stalin and why? Well, there's a number of books that are written by Stalin that are worth reading. The Foundations of Leninism. That's one of the texts that is widely read by Stalin. It's a series of lectures Stalin gave in the 1920s on Lenin's theories, the Foundations of Leninism. It's very widely studied. What else? There is There is what else? I mean, I find that a lot of Stalin's like speeches that he gave are very long and complicated, and there's a lot of like analysis of the global economy and stuff. And that tradition of the leader of the Communist Party giving a long, complicated speech, that's Fidel Castro, on May 1st, he would give a really long speech that was like for many hours. That kind of comes from Stalin, right? If you read these reports that Stalin gave to the leadership of the Communist Party, there are very long speeches that go over a lot of material. And that's where a lot of Stalin's depth and analysis comes through, is if you read those. It's funny, the works of Stalin. There's one book that Stalin wrote called Marxism and the Problems of Linguistics. And everyone knows it was meant to address some kind of disagreement within the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in the 1950s, in the early 50s. But it's Stalin's book about linguistics that was published. Economic Problems of Socialism in the USSR was Stalin's last book. And a lot of people read that book and argue that Stalin was going to go in the opposite direction of Khrushchev. That book was arguing that, that if Stalin had lived, he would have taken the Soviet Union in a much more socialistic and egalitarian direction. So there you go. Economic Problems of Socialism in the USSR. He defends the USSR against Marxist critics who say it's not socialist because it has commodity production. I remember reading that part. I enjoyed reading Stalin's. I've got it here. I actually enjoyed this volume. I mean, and this is a compilation, and it's printed in China, right? This is these kind of covers. This is the Beijing Foreign Language Press, right? This is like from China. And they published this compilation called On the Opposition. And this is all of Stalin's speeches against Trotsky. And it's very good. You learn a lot from reading this. You learn about, Trotsky misrepresenting the nature of the Russian Revolution. You learn about the theory of permanent revolution and why it's incorrect. Stalin on the Opposition is a good volume that I would recommend. I got a lot out of it. So there you go. Okay, I see we've got another. Hold on. So we've got oh, goodness gracious. Right, there we go. Get it back on the bookshelf there. We've got another super chat question here. So I'm going to scroll up. And if anyone has any more super chats, I mean, we're at the end here. So have you read Xi's A Nation Must Have a Soul? No, I have not. I have volumes 2 and 3, and I had volume 1. I just gave it to a friend of Xi Jinping's Governance of China. And the speeches are in there, are arranged by category. But no, I do not have. I have not read the Nation's Soul. Haven't read that. Haven't read it. So there you go. All right, folks. Anything else on people's minds for tonight? I am really happy about the Garland-Nixon victory. I think that was a real great step forward. I'm really happy about it. Really glad Garland-Nixon is back. I hope more people are back on social media soon. That's a real victory. I guess, is there anything else I should reflect on? I guess I'll pull up and see what's in the news. I mean, obviously there's that, that anti-gay shooting we talked about. There we go. But, I mean, it's been good, folks. Oh, Chris Harris. Thank you. He doesn't have anything he wants me to talk about, but he's just sending a donation. Well, thank you, Chris. It is appreciated, but I am here to answer your questions. If there's anything else people want to talk about. We're laid back. We're enjoying the holiday, and we're trying to keep a positive attitude. So much ugliness these days, so much negativity. But we're trying to keep a positive attitude. Books about Henry Wallace. That's a good one. There are some biographies, right? Isn't there a biography of Henry Wallace called An Uncommon Man? But yeah, books about Henry Wallace. Yeah, I mean, I've read the Communist Party's writings from that period, right? If you read, for example, William Z. Foster has a great pamphlet called In Defense of the Communist Party and Its Indicted Leaders. And in that pamphlet, he goes into a lot of detail about why they supported the 1948 presidential campaign of Henry Wallace. And I've actually gotten a lot out of William Z. Foster's pamphlet, In Defense of the Communist Party and Its Indicted Leaders. And there's a PDF of it online. I would really recommend that. So yeah, let me see if I can find the PDF here, because it's very much, he goes through what the Communist Party is charged with. Yeah, what the Communist Party is charged with, by the Department of Justice, and he debunks it point by point. It's very good. And actually, yes, here it is. So I will link the PDF in the chat. One of William Z. Foster's best books. So there we go. All right. Can gays lead the rainbow revolution? I don't know what a rainbow revolution is, And I'm one of those people who thinks that one of the problems is that that leftism is more focused on cultural issues and such. I mean, I have many friends who are gay, many friends who are trans, and I want equal rights for them, and I don't want them to be bullied or suppressed for who they are. But at the same time, socialism and Marxism is more about economics. It's more about, anti-imperialism and fighting for an economy organized to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few. It's not about just about sexual issues. So there you go. What can you talk about Cyrus the Great, and what can we learn from his rule? Well, he was an ancient Persian leader, right? Didn't he rescue the Jews? The Jews were facing persecution, and he took them in. He was the leader of the Persian Empire. So I don't know a huge amount about him, but I do know that, right, that he was a very important ancient Persian leader. He's credited with rescuing the Jews, and that Harry Truman, when he was being introduced by a rabbi, they introduced Harry Truman, the U.S. president, and they said, "Here's the man who helped to create Israel." And Harry Truman said, "What do you mean helped to create? I'm Cyrus. I am Cyrus," because Cyrus rescued the Jews. Oh, I have a super chat on Rockfin. What can you say about the alternative communist Olympics in Chicago in 1936? I have never heard of that. I do know that in 1936 that the Olympics, the Olympics were held in Nazi Germany. And that's where Jesse Owens, he won the medal, and Hitler wouldn't get photographed with him. And that was, the Nazis used the Olympics in 1936 to make a lot of propaganda. They used the Olympics in 1936 to make a lot of propaganda. Leni Riefenstahl, who was one of the main Nazi filmmakers, she made Triumph of the Will. She also made a film called Olympia that used the Olympics for Nazi propaganda. And the 1936 Nazi Germany had the Olympics. So I guess this person is asking about the alternative communist Olympics in Chicago. It sounds like the Communist Party boycotted the Olympics. They were in favor of boycotting it because of Nazi Germany. And that makes sense, right? They were building an anti-fascist front at that point. The Nazi government had killed many communists and was brutally suppressing the Communist Party. And they were trying to build an anti-fascist united front. So it makes sense that the Communist Party would organize some kind of anti-Nazi Olympics, an alternative to the 1936 Olympics, which the Nazis used for their propaganda purposes. So maybe it makes sense. I wasn't aware that they did that, but it sounds like something they would do. Very, very good. Very, very good. All right. Okay, folks. Well, it's been a fun stream. I'll be back tomorrow, probably. Tomorrow it might be a little bit later than usual, but we'll see. Every day is different. It depends what I've got in terms of work tomorrow and where I end up going tomorrow and everything. But we'll be back. We're just doing these every day. We're going to be streaming all the time. We're going to be streaming all the time, by the way. And I mean, since I've been back, I'm streaming all the time. It's great. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you do that, because we want to make sure that you're getting the notifications, etc. There's a lot of people who don't get the notifications or get unsubscribed by the algorithms accidentally or whatever. So make sure to hit the like button. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. I'm trying to do these as much as I possibly can, trying to keep it upbeat. I know, a lot of people said, Caleb, we don't want to hear about, what. And I said, yeah, you're right. I don't want to talk about it. And, it's hard not to focus on it when it's you, right? But we all know that making this about me is what they want to do. Right? They want to make it about, do you like Caleb or do you not like Caleb? Or do you know this detail about Caleb? That's what they want to do. But this isn't about me. It's about the ideas. It's about anti-imperialism. It's about Marxism. It's about the city building tendency. It's not about me on a personal level. They want to make it about me. because then it just becomes a battle of personalities. Do you like this guy? Do you not like this guy? So, I'm doing my best to just keep it focused on the ideas. I talk personal. I mean, my wife and I had a great day today. We ate some rotisserie chicken. We still have some pie. I bought some pie at the supermarket when I bought the rotisserie chicken. We tried to relax today. I didn't go to the gym today because I figured, today's Thanksgiving. I just want to rest and relax. So, we just tried to relax, and, I've been hearing from friends around the country, and just trying to relax and enjoy the holiday. The building we're in is very warm. The building I used to live in was not as warm. The apartment was very cold. We had to get space heaters even because, the landlord, it was just not properly, it was just not very warm. But this new apartment we're in is very warm. It's very warm. And so, but because of that, it's dry heat. And that's one thing. A lot of buildings in New York, you have the dry heat. So I'm drinking a lot of water. I'm going to stay hydrated because with that dry heat in these old New York City buildings with radiators, you often can get a headache and get dehydrated. So I'm drinking a lot of water. Gala likes my shirt. Thank you. I like the shirt as well. Yeah, it's it's more flannelly or whatever. It's again, I wear suits and ties a lot, but this is more of a laid back kind of like a shirt that's not meant to be made with a tie. Caleb needs a humidifier, says Jenny. Exactly. Yeah, and we have one in the bedroom because of that dry heat issue. But yeah, I'm trying to drink a lot of water because I don't want to get a headache from the dry heat, but it's a very warm building, which is good. Better than the old building that was always cold and we had to have the space heaters on this time of year and stuff like that. But the weather was nice. I went out today. It's Thanksgiving. It's, it's getting a little bit chilly, but not really. I mean, it was nice, and it was good to go out, pick up the groceries and the chicken and stuff for my wife, and, go around the store. And, tomorrow, depends on what's going on with work. I might go into the city to meet some friends. We'll see. But yeah, you just gotta live life. Good times, but I'm paying attention to everything. It looks like we got some high level interviews coming up. So next week we're going to have Bendu from American Autopsy. I just went on his channel a couple nights ago. So now he's going to come on our channel next week. It also appears that Jeff Young is going to be in the house. Jeff Young is going to be coming on this channel very soon. So that's going to be awesome. I'm really excited to have Jeff Young on. We may have some other high-level guests soon. So, good things are happening. Stay tuned. We got some different videos in the works. I'm working on one of my there's a project in the works. Let me just put it that way, for videos. There's a video that a friend of mine's working on, editing it, taking some of the things I've said and editing it kind of fancy. I'm posting, I guess I will mention this. I'm posting most of the, I can't post clips from this stream every day or it'll ruin the notifications. So I have been posting clips from these streams on this other channel I've created called Caleb Maupin Videos. If you want to see like clips from these streams, I'm trying to limit the number of videos I post on this stream, on this channel, because I don't want the notifications to get ruined. But I need to post another video. I have another video I'm going to post on here, like a clip from the stream. I'm going to post on this channel later. But I've been posting a lot of videos on this channel. This is the main place I will dump like clips from these streams so people can keep up with everything. All right. Very good. All right, folks, I guess we will end it for now. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. All right, everybody. Have a good night.